We're going to be looking at Macbeth Act 1, Scene 5, and in this act we finally see Lady Macbeth, and Lady Macbeth is Macbeth's wife. And so whenever we first see Lady Macbeth, in this part right here, she is reading a letter. And you can look over in the Shakespeare version, it says reading. So she has a letter, she's reading it. And in the letter, it's a letter from Macbeth. So let's do this. Letter from Macbeth. So in this letter from Macbeth, he's explaining the witches. And he says, the witches met me. And then he says, I tried to question them further. But look down here. He says, messengers from the king arrived greeting me as Thane of Cawdor, which is precisely how the Weird Sisters had saluted me before, calling me future king. So, Weird Sisters, that's the witches. So that part right there is the part where he's saying the witches had called me Thane of Cawdor and future king, and the messengers came in and told me that I was Thane of Cawdor. And then, what does this mean right here? When he says, I thought I should tell you this news, my dearest partner of greatness, so that you could rejoice along with me about the greatness that is promised to us. All right, so what is the promise or the greatness that's promised to them is king and queen. And so this kind of goes to show you that Macbeth is already thinking about what is promised to them because of what the witches had told him. So keeping that in mind, that in the letter, Lady Macbeth is finding out about what the witches told him. So the next part right here, she looks up from the letter. So at this point so far in Scene 5, she's been reading the letter from Macbeth. She looks up from the letter. So this is Lady Macbeth alone on stage, and these are her thoughts. This is what we call a soliloquy. I'm going to put the term over here. This is what we call a soliloquy. And if you look, it has the word solo in it because she's alone on stage by herself and that she's thinking aloud. A soliloquy, and you see the word solo. A soliloquy is whenever a character is alone on stage and you're seeing their thoughts. They're talking, but it's kind of like they're thinking aloud. So, and I'm going to put that here, thinking aloud. All right, so she's thinking aloud. Let's look at what she says about Macbeth here. So she starts off to saying, you're Thane of Glamis and Cawdor, and you are going to be king. So in her mind, you have to think. She just found out about this, and she's already thinking, all right, next step is king. And Macbeth is thinking this as well. All right, so let's look at what she worries about. She says, I worry about whether or not you have what it takes to seize the crown. So start thinking about this. What does it take for him to seize the crown? Well, there has to be no King Duncan. Then, I'm going to change colors so we don't get confused. She says, you are too full of milk of human kindness. So human kindness, so she says you have too much kindness to strike aggressively at your first opportunity. Whenever she says, and I'm going to go back to red, whenever she says strike aggressively at your first opportunity, what does she mean by that? What would she mean to strike aggressively? I'm going to put the word kill because that's what she's already thinking about. To strike aggressively, she says, you're too kind to kill King Duncan. You want to be powerful and you don't lack ambition. And I really want to focus in on that because we're going to be talking a lot about ambition. She says, you don't lack ambition, but you don't have the mean streak that calls for these things. So she says you have ambition, but you don't have the mean streak. All right. What you do, she says the things you want to do like a good man. All right. right, so just like she says human kindness up here, she says you want to be a good man. All right. So there's something you want down here a little bit further. There's something you want, but you're afraid to do what needs to do to get it. So I'm going to go back, just like she said, strike aggressively at your first opportunity. Then she says, you're afraid to do what you need to do to get it. Again, I'm going to go back up here. She's saying you're too afraid to kill King Duncan. You want it to be done for you. All right, so this last little bit here, she says, hurry home so I can persuade you and talk you out of whatever's keeping you from going after the crown. So the key word here is persuade. She is going to persuade Macbeth to do whatever it is that keeps him from the crown. So she's going to persuade him to kill King Duncan. All right, so what we see in this soliloquy, we find out a little bit about Macbeth and we find out a little bit about Lady Macbeth. Look at what is in blue. Human kindness, you're a good man. You want to do it like a good man. So what she's telling us about Macbeth is that he's a good person. He's full of human kindness and compassion. He doesn't want to do anything evil to get the crown. He doesn't want to have to kill. But with all of that, she says, all right, that's fine. You're a good man. You don't want to do what it takes, but I'm going to persuade you to do it. So we start to see a little bit about how conniving and heartless Lady Macbeth is because she wants to be queen. All right, on this next part, I'm just going to summarize this part right here. The servant comes in and just says, hey, the king's coming here tonight. Lady Macbeth at first does not believe him. And then he says, yes, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. They're on their way. I had to speed along to get here before they do. All right, so really that part, just summarize. The king's coming. This is where she finds out about that. Now we're going to look in this next part and we're going to see what her thoughts are in response to finding out that King Duncan will be staying at their castle that night. All right, so this next part we're looking at, this is Lady Macbeth, and let's look at what she's thinking. This is right after the servant leaves. She says, he announces Duncan's entrance into my fortress where he will die. So she's already has it in her mind that King Duncan will die. Then she calls on murderous spirits. Come, you spirits that assist murderous thoughts. Make me less like a woman and more like a man and fill me from head to toe with desperate cruelty. So she's calling on the spirits there. Then thicken my blood to clog up my veins so I won't feel remorse. So she doesn't want to feel remorse. She wants to be filled from head to toe with deadly cruelty. She wants no human passion to stop her. So no human compassion to stop her evil plan. All right, come to my female breast and turn my mother's milk into poisonous acid, you murdering demons. So, let's see. Let's underline that. Cover the world in darkest smoke of hell so that my sharp knife can't see the wound it cuts open. All right, so I underlined a few things that you can see here. And she's calling on these spirits who assist in murderous thoughts. So she's basically saying, I want to be from head to toe with desperate cruelty, deadly cruelty. She says diarist in Shakespeare's version. She doesn't want to feel remorse. She wants to have no human compassion. She wants her mother's milk, which that mother's milk is compassion. That mother's milk is taking care of something and being comforting. But she doesn't want that mother's milk. Instead, she wants poisonous acid. So you can see here that in this part, she is wanting to be evil. And I'm going to put that word there. She wants that evil to come over her so that she can convince Macbeth and go through with what it takes for Macbeth to become king. All right, so on this next part, this is the part where Macbeth comes in. And remember that Lady Macbeth said a little bit earlier, she's going to persuade him to kill King Duncan. So he comes in, and Macbeth says Duncan is coming here tonight. And look at the question and the answer right here. Lady Macbeth asks, when is he leaving? And Macbeth says, he will leave tomorrow. Now, look at Lady Macbeth's response to that. That day will never come. All right, look at the way Shakespeare wrote it. Never shall sun that morrow see. So he will never see tomorrow. And why will he never see tomorrow? He'll be dead by tomorrow, is what she's saying. So he'll be dead by tomorrow. I want to bring up this right here. She says, your face betrays strange feelings, my lord, and people will be able to read it like a book. So she's talking about his face, and she says people will be able to read it like a book. Whenever she says read it like a book, this is a simile, and she's comparing his face to a book. And have you ever heard somebody say, I can read you like a book? What does that mean? It means that I can look at you and I know what you're thinking and feeling. So what she's saying right here is that it's easy for people to look at Macbeth and know what he's thinking and feeling. So she says, you have to deceive them. You have to look as the occasion warrants. You have to be kind. You have to be excited. You have to be welcoming. Then right here, she says, you should look like an innocent flower, but be like the snake that hides under the flower. So, let's just talk about this again. Another simile. And where do I have room for this? All right. So, I'm going to have to put it right here. It's another simile. And she says he needs to look like an innocent flower, but be the snake underneath it. So let's talk a little bit about what she means by this. And she even says the innocent flower. So she's saying you need to look beautiful. You need to look innocent and sweet. And I hope y'all can see this well enough. Okay, so she's saying look innocent, but then she says, but be the snake underneath it. And whenever she says be the snake underneath it, what do you know about snakes and what they represent? Snakes represent deception, but it's that evilness that she's saying that he needs to be. So look innocent, but you have to be evil. And we get that from that simile of look like an innocent flower, but be like the snake that hides underneath the flower. So she's saying on the outside, you need to be, on the outside, you've got to be seem very innocent, but deep down inside, underneath all of that innocent exterior, you really need to be evil. And you have to be able to do what it takes to kill King Duncan. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is two things that Lady Macbeth says to Macbeth. The first thing, and they kind of go together, but she says, let me handle tonight's preparations, because tonight will change every night and day for the rest of our lives. So she says, let me handle everything. And then, just before the end of the scene, she says, you should project a peaceful mood, because if you look troubled, you will arouse suspicion. So she's saying, just look peaceful and normal. And then I'm going to underline this part, leave the rest to me. These two things are very similar. She's saying, I'm going to handle everything. Leave it to me. So Lady Macbeth is doing the plans. And I'm going to put that. Lady Macbeth is the one planning. She's the one making sure that everything's going to happen. in terms of preparing for King Duncan to be murdered. And we know that she's going to plan King Duncan being murdered because of what she said. So that ends this scene with Lady Macbeth just saying, go, act normal, leave everything else to me. And then we end scene 5.